guys, I am here to teach you history today. And I am going to be assigning pages 150 to 152 for you to read today. And then if you want to do the study guide, that is up to you. I'm not going to talk about pages. Look on the bottom for the page number and do that if you want. Okay? I'm going to talk about some of the topics that you have learned in the last two lessons, just to kind of show you where we are. So you read about the election of 1860 where Lincoln wins, and this election and the election of Abraham Lincoln led to secession, and so South Carolina voted to secede from the Union, meaning that they left the Union and they didn't want anything to do with the Union. Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas soon follow South Carolina, and they create the Confederate States of America. And the war begins when the Confederate forces attack Fort Sumter on April 12, 1861. Now, there were strengths and weaknesses of both sides. Okay, so the advantages for the North were that the North had more people, they had more railroads and factories, easier to ship troops and supplies, more mules and horses, and they also had a navy. However, the South also had their advantages. They had less travel because a lot of the battles will happen in the South and not in the North, although the North will have its share of battles as well. They were fighting for their homeland. They were more formally trained military leaders, which meant they were already prepared for battle. And then the big question right up to my pages that I'm going to talk about is, who would Britain and France side with? Would they side with the North or would they side with the South? And would they side with the same side, or would one side with one side and the other with the other? And then you also learned about the first battle at Bull Run, and that leads to my lesson. So I'm you are reading pages 150 to 152, and I'm just going to give you an overview of those pages. So, fighting in earnest, the Eastern Front, Union goals were focused on Richmond, Virginia. They believed that if they could capture Richmond, that they would be able to take that capital and they would be able to win the war and stop the succession of states. Okay, Robert E. Lee, however, stopped them at every battle. He was able to stop them. So he is going to be a big deal. We're going to see his name quite a bit today and moving forward. So the Peninsular Campaign is what I'm going to talk about next, and this is an attack led by General George McClellan, and McClellan decided to attack a different way. So he was still trying to attack Richmond, but he wanted to go via the Virginia coast. But unfortunately, although this was a good plan, he was too timid and didn't push quickly toward the Confederate capital. He kind of held back. Okay, he obviously was scared or worried or believed that they had more troops than he did. And the Union meets with Southern resistance, and McClellan was hesitant to attack. So again, we see he's a little timid and he's a little hesitant to do anything against the South. And then late in June 1862, the Union was only 5 miles away from Richmond, so close. However, by then, Confederate reinforcements had arrived, and Union had 100,000 soldiers, and the Confederates had 90,000. But McClellan thought they had more and wouldn't attack. So 7 days went by as they attacked each other. So he did end up attacking each other, but not quickly enough, because he ends up withdrawing from the battle, which means that he's basically surrendering that battle, not the entire war, but that battle. And that led to Richmond remaining the capital. Okay, then the next battle was Union General John Pope, and he was the next one to try to defeat Lee and his army. So late August 1862, Pope's army marched into Virginia. And from August 28th to the 30th, they fought a second battle at Bull Run. And this made both sides realize that this is not going to be an easy war, that nobody's going to give up. Neither side is going to surrender. So General Lee was assisted by Stonewall Jackson and James Longstreet, and together they defeated Pope. Okay, and some things about General Robert E. Lee, just a couple of notes about him, was that these battles that he won left him highly encouraged and hopeful, and he believed that the Union generals were not good enough to beat him. And now he believed that if he could invade the North, he could win the war. And after the second battle at Bull Run, he marched north, which was unexpected, and he's going to meet again with McClellan. So they meet again, and Lee decides to split his army into 5 parts with the idea of reuniting him. However, one of the Confederate officers loses the battle plan, and McClellan actually gets them. And so even with this advantage that McClellan had, he still does not attack, or he's still hesitant to attack. So on September 17th, 1862, the two armies met by Antietam Creek in Maryland, and McClellan's army outnumbered Lee's 2-1. Even being outnumbered by the Confederate army was able to hold its ground, and McClellan failed to seize his advantage. He had the invasion plan, okay? He could have ended the war, but he didn't. And this was the bloodiest single-day battle of the war, but it did not change the situation in the East. We're going to leave the East and go to the West. And there was more hope for the Union in the West than there was in the East. And the biggest difference was in the East, we had somebody who was hesitant, okay? General George McClellan was hesitant. However, in the West, we have General Ulysses S. Grant, okay, who will later become president. He is more of a leader and more capable of doing what he needs to do. So in the winter and spring of 1862, Grant moved against 2 Confederate forts, Fort Henry and Dawson, which guarded tributary rivers of the Mississippi. So they guarded like kind of the entrance to the Mississippi. And once these forts would fall, the Union could sail Tennessee's major interior rivers. So it would give them access to one of the important states in the South. Okay? On April 8th, 1862, Pope was able to gain control over the fort and Confederate army. And on May 1st, Union troops occupied New Orleans. And although the Union made advances on the Confederate army in the West, the Confederates still controlled Chattanooga, which linked the railroads to the South, which allowed the Confederacy to transport men and supplies to meet Union advances. So kind of right now, they're kind of at a standstill, or if I would say right now, I would say that definitely the Confederates have a little more of an advantage because they have General Robert E. Lee. But as the war goes on, we see the advantages of both sides, and we're going to see them go back and forth. The Union will win a battle, and then the Confederates. But everything is planned, and eventually we will see who wins the war. I mean, we already know. Of course, the Union wins the war. Otherwise, we'd be flying the Confederate flag. But we're not. We fly the American flag because the Union won the Civil War. So your job is to now read those pages on your own. Now, I went through a lot of details, but I didn't go through everything. So your job is to read those pages, not just listen to what I had to say. And if you want to do the study guide, it's a great way to reinforce the information that you learned. So that is all I have for you on this Thursday. I hope you enjoyed this history lesson, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.